Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is accountability. The time has come for a thorough investigation into the Hamas massacre of October 7th. Enough with the excuses, enough putting off the inevitable. There are those who argue and say, not yet, who say, wait until the war is over. They claim that an investigation now will distract the IDF, the intel agencies, and the political leadership from the concentration needed to make the crucial decisions to win this war. They are wrong. Israel is a strong democracy. At any given moment, the IDF, the intel agencies, and the political leadership juggle multiple issues, huge issues, many of which we never even hear about. They are the A-team, and if these go, by the way, there'll be another A-team. It's the A-team. They can handle it. The shock is worn off. The pain will never disappear. The more time that passes, the more memories become faded or altered or even influenced. The longer it takes, the more likely evidence will fade away and or disappear. And it's been too long already. In December, a mere 2 months after the massacre, fears surfaced about commanders deleting video of Hamas training and other evidentiary material. Thankfully, in the end, the evidence was, quote, relocated and deemed to be viewed only by people with special clearance. On December 3rd, posted on an IDF X account, the Twitter account, was the message, and I'm quoting, all the materials from the operational systems of the IDF related to documented events are preserved and accessible to the relevant parties, unquote. The message continued, like other operational materials, access to the materials is blocked to those who are not required to deal with them. Any other claim is baseless, unquote. No question that, leading up to October 7th, many mistakes were made. No question that those who made the mistakes are already girding themselves against the accusations that will be hurled against them. No question that they are already internally accounting for their ultimate accountability. Their mistakes were born out of a dangerous, dare I say, toxic mix of ineptitude, negligence, and haughty arrogance. That more people in senior positions have not yet done their own soul-searching and stepped down after publicly making their mea culpas honestly surprises me at this stage. But that's where the arrogance comes in. They know who they are. The guilt alone would crush most people. But these people are different. Responsibility stops at the top. The heads of many of the, and deputy heads, by the way, of IDF, intel agencies, and certainly the Prime Minister should resign. They would be smart to recount their mistakes without violating security issues and offer explanations for why they are still in their positions. Matan Engelman, the Mevaker HaMedina, Israel's State Comptroller and Ombudsman, announced in December that he was opening a thorough, impartial investigation into the massacre. The Comptroller of the State of Israel is much more than a simple comptroller. A comptroller normally looks at accounting and finances. The English title comptroller is misleading and incorrect. The Mevaker HaMedina is the critic of the state. That's its translation. It's much more apt, and it more clearly defines the role of Engelman. The Mevaker is voted in by the Knesset, Israel's parliament, and is accountable to the Knesset and the Knesset alone. It is a non-political position. In fact, the position may not be held by a member of Knesset. The task of Mevaker HaMedina is to investigate and review all functions of government. Nothing is beyond their investigative purview. The Mevaker is also the address for all complaints against the government, which means the Mevaker is also the ombudsman of the nation. The Movement for Quality Government in Israel, the MQG, petitioned the High Court, Israel's Supreme Court, to stop the investigation of the Mevaker. The Attorney General's office joined the case. The Attorney General wrote in their submission to the High Court, to the Supreme Court, this, and I'm quoting here exactly, The requested interim order for Engelman's investigation to be halted should be accepted, as holding an investigation at this time will lead to substantive harm to the operational capability of security services and harm the fighting. According to the reports, the IDF went directly to Engelman's office, the heads of the IDF, imploring him to halt his investigation. The Supreme Court refused to stay or halt the Mevaker's investigation. The court gave all the parties until June 8th to write their reasons for their stand. In the meantime, agencies, including the IDF, must adhere to Engelman's request for material and information. Parenthetically, for those worried about senior leadership having too much to deal with at one time, this is the same date laid down to the Bibi Netanyahu and Benny Gantz to come up with a new war plan, or Gantz will resign from the government. Exact same date. In the spirit of full disclosure, I must tell you something else. Engelman is married to my wife's cousin. I'm not here defending him. I'm defending the Jewish state. I'm demanding justice for all those murdered, maimed, and held captive. My agenda is to help heal a ruptured and torn state, the deeply saddened state of Israel. The lion's share of this war is over, but the war could drag on. The heart of the Jewish state now beats to a new normal rhythm. The time has come for those who should take responsibility to accept responsibility. For those who are accountable to answer. This is a moral and an ethical issue for the state and for its leaders. A thorough investigation is an issue of national safety and national security. As Engelman correctly asserts, finding out exactly what happened and what led up to the massacre of October 7th will absolutely ensure a safer Israel. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from Palestinian Media Watch, PMW as we call it. It is entitled, Hey Norway, Ireland, Spain. This is the Palestine PA Fatah say you recognized. This column was written by Nan Jacques Zilberdick, and it was published on May 26, 2024. The piece is a short, pithy assessment of Norway, Ireland, and Spain's decision to diplomatically recognize Palestine as a state. It's based on the real attitude of the PA, as expressed in their official cartoon, one of the things that they bring, celebrating the decision made by these three countries. This is how she begins. Following Norway, Ireland, and Spain's recognition of a Palestinian state last week, PA chairman Abbas's Fatah movement published the above cartoon. It shows exactly what Palestine, the PA, and Fatah say the European countries endorsed. The cartoon shows Palestine having replaced the entire state of Israel and the PA areas. The map is formed by three arms painted in the colors of the flags of the three European countries. The Norwegian arm writes the word Palestine. The Irish arm waves the Palestinian flag, while the Spanish hand makes a V sign with the fingers, signifying victory. Nan now explains that this objective of the Palestinian Authority is not hidden. It's not a mystery. Rather, it is clearly articulated in Palestinian PA official websites and their materials. She continues by explaining that Palestinian Media Watch has repeatedly shown that the PA, Fatah, explained to their own people that since Israel has no right to exist, Fatah's goal and the Palestinian destiny is to replace Israel with a Palestinian state from the river to the sea. As the column comes to an end, the author concludes that these countries are either diplomatically inept or actually agree with the stated goals of the PA. She writes, it should have been the most basic preliminary investigation for Norway, Ireland, and Spain to check what the PA tells its own people and that the Palestinian state means before they recognize it. The shocking reality is that either these countries have no idea what the Palestinian state they are recognizing, in which case the governments are a diplomatic disgrace and an embarrassment to their countries, or possibly they all agree with the Spanish Deputy Prime Minister, Yolanda Diaz, who last week vowed that, quote, Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, unquote, in which case they are ideologically in the same camp with the state sponsors of terror like Iran. This was a short but extremely powerful and important column. Thank you, PMW, for so clearly bringing this to our attention. Next up is a column by Ben-Dror Yemini. The column was published also on May 26th in Ynet and is entitled International Courts, a Terrorist's Last Line of Defense. Subtitled, Opinion, originally intended to curtail horrific acts of genocide, ethnic cleansing international tribunals have been co-opted by the very people they were designed to stop, putting democratic nations that follow the rules on trial. Before I get to the column itself, I need to explain a few things and straighten up some confusion. Many people, including pundits and the media outlets, constantly confuse and conflate the ICJ and the ICC. They often just refer to them as The Hague. But the ICJ and the ICC are not the same entity. They are different courts with different purposes, different roles, and different powers. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is also known as the World Court. It was established in 1945. The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is one of 6 principal organs of the United Nations. The ICJ is where the UN countries can bring cases against other countries, the 193 members. It's not a Supreme Court. It can only hear a case when one or more countries brings a case against another country. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, is a criminal court. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, is where cases against individuals, not countries, are brought alleging violations of human rights and crimes against humanity. The ICC is only loosely affiliated with the UN. The ICC was created in 2001 as a result of a treaty called the Rome Statute. Its objective was to remove the impunity of mass murderers and heinous criminals. Now back to the column with Ben-Dror Yemini. He explains that these courts, both of them, fall far short of their intended objectives. He writes, in theory, international law exists to protect innocent lives and prevent atrocities like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and mass starvation. Yet, ever since the establishment of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, and the International Criminal Court, the ICC, these institutions have arguably fallen short of their lofty goals. Since World War II, where between 50 and 70 million people perished, most of them civilians, an additional 90 million lives were lost to conflicts, with another 100 million succumbing to diseases and hunger resulting from these wars. Shockingly, according to UN estimates, 90% of these casualties are innocent civilians. Rather than curbing violence and injustice, international courts have become instruments wielded by oppressive regimes and terrorist organizations to target democratic nations. Democratic states inertly strive to avoid committing crimes without needing external oversight. Conversely, it's the oppressive states that urgently require such scrutiny. Now Ben-Dror Yemini demonstrates just how both these courts have been inverted to exactly the opposite of their intended goals. By dubious states and people. The column continues. Ironically, these very states and their sponsored entities show a blatant disregard for international tribunals. Instead, they manipulate these courts to accuse those who combat terror. The ICJ and the ICC, conceived in response to the horrors of World War II and Nazism, now paradoxically serve entities like Hamas, a terrorist organization calling for the annihilation of Jews and embodying modern-day Nazism. Whom do these courts protect? Hamas. Whom do they target? Israel. This is the tragic paradox of international law. Now Yemini offers a classic example of the misuse of their stated functions, using South Africa and the ICJ as well as the ICC as his examples. He writes, Julius Malema, a prominent South African politician who serves as the president of the group called Economic Freedom Fighters, openly pledges to bolster support for terrorism and arm Hamas if he gains governmental power, with elections imminent. He also advocates for the murder of white people, Alarmingly, 27,494 murders occurred in South Africa last year alone, surpassing the inflated UN estimates of casualties in Gaza. Yet, this terror-supporting, violence-ridden state exploits the ICJ to wage its campaign against Israel. Now, according to Ben-Dror Yamini, the ICJ, the legal theory of the decision could be applied to many countries, not just Israel. This is what he writes. The ICJ's recent decision is a significant setback for Israel. It implies that no democratic nation can effectively combat a terrorist organization embedded within and backed by civilian populations. According to the logic of the ICJ judges, Britain committed crimes against Germany, the US against Japan, and similarly in Iraq, Afghanistan, and against ISIS. If this reasoning holds, injunctions should have been issued against all these nations. For Israel, the ICJ's decision is a blow to its global image, particularly when paired with ICC prosecutor Karim Khan's request for arrest warrants against top-tier Israeli politicians. Although the ICJ's ruling technically permits continued fighting, global media are broadcasting headlines claiming the court issued an injunction against Israel regarding the continuation of the war. In conclusion, Ben-Dror explains that the entire system is inverted. It's totally upside down, and he writes, "This narrative appears to favor terrorism over justice. Unsurprisingly, Hamas quickly lauded the decision, which serves their interests. An organization dedicated to the destruction of Jews, akin to modern Nazi entity, benefits from the international tribunal established to combat Nazism and its genocidal agenda. This is not the International Court of Justice. It's the International Court for the Support of Terrorism and Extermination." As always, Ben-Dror Yamini, well done. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 6 cartoons and 1 meme today. As I mentioned more than once, many cartoons have been very critical of Israel, and especially of Netanyahu. But the ice has been broken, and some cartoonists have returned to a more moderate sense of sanity. These first 2 cartoons illustrate just that, especially in light of the ICC and the ICJ. First up is a set of 3 posters. The faces of the posters belong to Karim Khan, Bibi Netanyahu, and Yahya Sinwar. The front poster is of Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor who is issuing requests for indictments against Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and Hamas's leader Sinwar. Khan is wanted for drawing false equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Netanyahu is wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and Sinwar is wanted for, among other crimes, murder, rape, and torture. Were it not true, it would be funny. Next up is also a cartoon about the ICC. Khan tells the Interpol police to go into 2 tunnels and make arrests. They are to arrest Hamas in the terror tunnel and arrest Netanyahu in the barrel of a tank. That's funny. This next cartoon is an Israeli bomb striking a tent in Rafah. I must say, this cartoon needs no explanation. Now we see a Hamas tunnel emerging from the ground. Rockets are being shot from the tunnel, and Israeli soldiers are being grabbed up into the tunnel itself. The cartoonist got it right. This is Hamas's goal. Thankfully, despite their propaganda and efforts, Hamas has not successfully captured Israeli soldiers since October 7th. Recently, however, Hamas did post a video of a kidnapping of an Israeli soldier. The video was false. This next cartoon depicts tourists and the media visiting Gaza. There is a welcome sign riddled with a few bullet holes, welcoming them to Gaza Hedge. The cartoon is a play on Stonehenge because the destroyed buildings in Gaza look like Stonehenge, at least as they're described in the cartoon. More on Gaza. This cartoon, an Israeli tank is building an Israeli sandcastle which the water of the Mediterranean Sea is about to wash away. The Israeli flag is toppling down. The cartoonist is saying to us, Israel will soon be gone. And finally, in the aftermath of the helicopter crash in Iran, where Iranian President Raisi was killed, there is a power vacuum in Iran. Inside this power vacuum, we have an issue. So we have a vacuum canister in the meme, and Grand Ayatollah Khamenei is there. The cap of the canister reads, expiring soon. The Ayatollah will be either 84 or 85 years old on his birthday. The exact year and his birthday are unclear. But nonetheless, the cartoonist is saying that this means that the Ayatollah will not be in position for much longer. And Raisi, who was thought by most to be his successor, is no longer here. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Once again, following reports in the north of Israel regarding a suspected hostile aircraft infiltration, the IDF reported that the Israeli Air Force fighter jets successfully intercepted drones heading toward Israel from Lebanon. This exchange is happening more and more often. Following precise intelligence, the IDF also directed the Israeli Air Force strike that eliminating terrorist Azmi Abu Daka, an operative in Hamas. He was the head of the procurement department. Daka was actively involved in smuggling weapons and terror funds into Gaza. The Israel Air Force also struck dozens of other terrorist targets, including 2 tactical-level Hamas commanders who were preparing to attack IDF troops in the Rafah area. According to Palestinian reports, the commander of the Central District of Hamas's police in Gaza was also eliminated and targeted from air by Israel. The incident reportedly took place in Deir el-Balach in central Gaza. Moving now to Dublin in Ireland. Israel's ambassador to Dublin warned that a crisis in bilateral ties over Ireland's plan to recognize a Palestinian state sends the wrong message about Ireland as tech hub. The ambassador indicated that Ireland's decision is worrying Israeli investors in the Irish IT services sector. Speaking in Jerusalem, where she held foreign ministry consultations after being recalled to protest the Irish decision, Ambassador Dana Ehrlich voiced hope of returning to Ireland, though, as she pointed out, she saw its government as siding with the Palestinians against Israel. Ehrlich said that all aspects of Israel-Irish ties were under review, but stopped short of predicting further action by the government. She said, a public mood of hostility, which some Jews deem anti-Semitic, is making Israelis question their place in Ireland. A threat to tech services, which accounts for the lion's share of the $5 billion annual trade between Ireland and Israel. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the Taliban is the real power in Afghanistan now, and that the group, that is the Taliban's possible removal from Moscow's list of banned organizations, reflects objective reality. TASS, Russia's state news agency, reported that on Monday, recently, Russia's ministries have advised President Vladimir Putin that Moscow could remove the Taliban from the list. Moscow also is showing support for the Taliban because they invited the Taliban to a top economic forum in St. Petersburg, scheduled for June. After Hamas let a rocket barrage into central Israel in the areas of Gush Dan, the Sharon, Sami Abu Zuri, the official Hamas spokesperson, said that, quote, firing at Tel Aviv is evidence that the occupation failed to achieve its war goals, unquote. The spokesman called on Americans to pressure Israel to stop the war, saying, quote, there is no choice but to pressure Israel, unquote. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that Jews have been persecuted throughout the ages, and yet we survive? Despite the trauma, we thrive and continue to grow in our amazing creativity. It's better than survival. But we remember the atrocities. Here is a short clip. It's a dramatic interpretation representing witnesses from various Jewish persecutions throughout Jewish history, culminating in October 7th.
זה היה בבוקר של 9 באב. התעוררנו מרעש מחריד. לא הבנו מה קורה. עד שהבנו, אז הרומאים התחילו לשרוף את המקדש. ותוך רגע הם מילאו את הרחובות, התחלנו לשמוע צעקות מרחוק, אז סגרנו את החלונות, נעלנו את הדלתות, וישבנו בשקט, בלי להוציא מילה. ואז שמענו צרחות מהבית ליד.
הבנו שפרצו לבית של השכנים שלנו. משפחה נחמדה, האבא היה המוהל של הקהילה, הוא עשה לבן שלי את הברית. שמענו אותם צועקים, עד שלא שמענו יותר כלום. חשבנו לברוח ליער, אבל כל מי שניסה לברוח גילה שפשוט אי אפשר.
הם חיכו ברחובות ותפסו כל מי שיצא החוצה מהבית. השלג התערבב עם הדם. אנחנו חיכינו שמישהו יבוא לעזור לנו. המשטרה, הצבא, מישהו, אבל אף אחד לא בא. התפללנו לאלוהים, אבל גם הוא לא בא. הרגשנו כל כך לבד. ואז הם באו ודפקו אצלנו על החלונות, אז מהר לקחנו את הילדים, תפסנו אותם, רצנו לכיוון הגג.
יכולנו לראות את כל הבתים מסביב, הכל אש, הכל שרוף. ראינו את הפנים שלהם, של האנשים שעד אתמול קנינו אצלם ירקות, הופכים חיות אדם.
הם היו באקסטזה, הם ניפצו את החלונות הרעבה. ראיתי אותם שורפים את החנות של אחותי, אחר כך עולים ושורפים את הבית כנסת, והכל היה מלא עשן וסמוכיות, לא חשבתי שבני אדם מסוגלים לעשות דברים כאלה. זה היה כאילו להסתכל על הרוע האנושי בעיניים.
הם ידעו בדיוק לאיזה בתים להיכנס, כי הם סימנו אותם בצבע אדום. הקטנה שלי שאלה אותי אם הם הולכים לרצוח גם אותנו. לא ידעתי מה להגיד לה. אמרתי לה, לפחות אנחנו ביחד.
כולם שואלים אם נצליח לחיות עם זה. אנחנו חייבים איכשהו להמשיך הלאה, לאט לאט, להתחיל לבנות מחדש.
את כל מה שהם הרסו, את כל מה שהם שרפו.
את המשפחות, את הקהילות, את העם.
אנחנו לא הולכים לשום מקום. אנחנו נמשיך לחיות פה.
נמשיך לחיות בשביל כל מי שאיבדנו, בשביל הילדים שלנו. אנחנו נהיה בסדר.
בפנים עמוק,
אני יודעת את זה.
רק אם הייתי יכולה לראות עוד פעם אחת את אחותי.
הבן שלי.
את האח שלי.
את האחיין שלי.
את אבא שלי.
את אמא שלי.
רק עוד חיבוק אחד.
May October 7th be the last of the persecutions. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.